Hey traders, this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day recap for Thursday, October 8th, 18th, excuse me, with a big return to volatility today. So we'll go over that in just a minute. I wanted to just touch upon the earnings reports that we've got after the close today because I do think they're interesting. PayPal, which we did see a decent amount of option activity, mostly some call buying going into the report. It's tough. My view on that is you never know exactly what they're doing. Sometimes they are hedging a little bit, sometimes speculating, but it is difficult to tell what they're doing with option flow going into earnings. They did beat most of their, I think basically all of their metrics were pretty good here. And they're almost back to where they were at the open today. So I would say just overall a tough day to report earnings. I think really tough given what the market did, especially in the growth area. ISRG also reported, I think, I did not see their guidance, but this quarter I thought was pretty good. AXP also, American Express had good numbers. You can see none of these names are really up that much. So it just kind of tells you what type of environment we're in right now. It's a risk-off environment. No one really wants to kind of go in and start buying these things after hours. I think the market is a little bit frozen. There's risks all over the place. I don't need to tell you that. You could just turn on CNBC and they're talking about it left and right and giving you all the reasons. So we don't need to rehash any of those, but I will rehash a couple of things that I said yesterday in yesterday's video. I said that the international markets are going to need to, continue to move a bit, particularly China, and Shanghai sold off pretty hard last night. So that's becoming more and more of an issue. That we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and the market, the U.S. market does not like that. The other thing that we talked about in yesterday's video, kind of rehash a couple of these points, but one of which is, when you have these value areas that I have on my charts, right? We talked about how this one set up for a bounce, a move outside of value, and we had a huge bounce day. That was what, on Tuesday? Yeah. And then today, we had a similar, not exactly the same value area, but look at how slim or how narrow the value area was. So unfortunately, this did not go to the upside. It did not even get close. We fell apart here. We broke back in, and then we broke out of value for the day. And across sectors, it really took a turn for the worse with some higher risk areas, small caps, which are really a problem area at this point. Another problem area that I will get to because let me just bring up the daily chart first. But we didn't even get a retest up to the 200 before we turned back. So this is going to take some while. I think anyway, a while to kind of work its way through. They're still buying a lot of puts right now. SMH, they're buying more. They were buying more puts in the semis right now. Again, I think one of the more vulnerable areas. Again, we talked about that in last night's video as well. A very vulnerable area with the trade tariffs going on right now. Let's just see what the put call ratio was for the day, because I do think that there was a decent amount of more puts that were bought than calls today. A lot of index too. Let's just wait for this to come up here. Oops. Point six, I guess this is from yesterday. So this one did not. I think I need the intraday one. Here it is. Here's the intraday one. The other one gets updated later at night. We have 1.24, so a pretty high reading in terms of put-call ratio. So there's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of put buying going on. Notice this has been hanging around the 1 for a decent amount of time. We didn't get one of these like real, quick days up to 2. It's kind of just been hanging around elevated levels. The same thing with the VIX. The same thing with the fear and greed index, which I think is around the lower teens right now. But this is what the VIX looks like. It did not break the 20-period moving average, so it bounced right in here. And, sometimes this takes some time to work its way through. Then there's just a number of other issues that seem to be piling up. Buyback, for the most part, Buyback plans are turned off right now, but earnings season is always a tricky time. So, bottom line, I think for me, and again, I'm really not coming out with any major market calls, so I apologize if you're listening to the video and looking for some real major guidance for tomorrow or for next week. I tell you, I don't have a lot of conviction to the short side or to the long side. I think you just have to kind of let this play out a little bit, and if you're really good scalping and maybe putting on a couple overnight trades, then this is a good market for you. I tend to trade more IWM, Qs, and SPY rather than single stock names as we're moving. You can make some decent money if you kind of stay as objective as possible and not perma anything, not a perma bull, not a perma bear, and just kind of take the market for what it is. And if it's going to move fast, what I tend to use is the value areas. I made a little boo-boo trading today. I don't know what happened actually. I don't mind saying these things. It is what it is. Everybody's human. But I actually tried to buy some puts today, and for whatever reason, I looked at my account and I had calls. So I actually timed it pretty well. Not the calls, but if I would have bought the puts correctly. But that type of thing happens, and I don't know why. Because I did the same thing. I tried to buy more puts again, and they gave me calls on my account. So I know this is funny. You might think this is hilarious. Maybe it'll give you a little bit of comedy relief, but I very rarely make a mistake like that. So I don't know. But yeah. So anyway, here was your retest, and here was your failure. So if you're quick, and if you could just basically say, have in the back of your mind, and that's kind of why I went over. Yes, I can't believe I'm admitting to that, but it is what it is. If the one thing that I said is with this value area, it's very slim, and we were expecting a big move. So if you took it for what it's worth and said, hey, once we break one way or another, you can go ahead and attack from the call or the put side for an intraday trade. Again, you don't have to put on that major risk and try to come up with whatever the crystal balls say on Twitter. You could basically just wait for it, and once we start to break, the market seems to have momentum once we go in that direction. So that's the way. That's the way I'm playing it right now. You just have to actually make sure you're buying the right thing. But that screwed me up for the day in terms of what I was doing. But option activity has been really noisy, and that's generally how it is every quarter. There was some interesting order flow that we continue to see. There were some Google calls. There was some longer dated calls, even though this is this January on it. It's actually January 2021. So I don't know if they're replacing stock and going into a little bit of options, because you do have less risk to the downside with the options. But we saw that in a couple names. Edwards, which I like, is a name that's been on my radar this week, and I owned a little bit of it. Once we started to go south, I actually dumped them, but it actually hung in there pretty good today. But here's what it actually came back. And you notice, one of the things to concentrate on today is, names that held up pretty well. So this was something, this is something that I try to provide at least a couple days of the week. But this was the watch list that I came out with, just a couple themes. I thought restaurants were looking okay. I think Chipotle hung in there. Chipotle actually might have had a positive day. Also, Habitat is a name. Here's the Edwards that I had out, and a couple of the just to kind of go through the names. I do like to see how these things ended for the day, names that were on my watch list. But yeah, so this was a pretty good pick I had, considering the market. S&P was down 1.4% and Chipotle was up 40 basis points. So I'll take that as a win. Another name that I was looking at was Habitat. This actually went down. Oh, geez, this went down 3.8% today. HABT. Then a few other names that I was looking at. Regeneron. Let's just see how this ended up for the day. It's still kind of chopping around. So again, down 1%, not that bad. Maybe Habitat, I will take off my watch list for now. A few other names. I thought MDT had a real nice couple days. Believe it or not, that just looks like an inside day. So that may be a name to go after for tomorrow. I'll be watching that name. Just an inside day. It held the bottom of value. So all in all, not bad. So those were a couple names that I'm watching. A couple of them acted pretty well. So they'll be on the radar for tomorrow. All right, guys. So that's it. No major predictions out of me for tomorrow. Again, I think if you're very nimble, you could take advantage of this and you could scalp, very very decently for some profits. Just have to be objective and just follow where the price is going for the day, and then go from there. Try not to make it too complicated. I think overnight again gives you very good signals. If everything is green when you walk in the morning, when Europe is up big and when China rallies, you know that you've got a good chance to play things to the upside. If things are get majorly hit in China and across the board in Asia, same thing in Europe, then you might have some more pain to a bigger move to the downside. Just a very very easy logical way to think about things. So again, try to keep it simple with these market moves. Have a great night, everybody, and see you tomorrow.